I am Mehak Kharb, an intern at Fprc. Hello and welcome to Fprc video presentation on Indian Diaspora's partnership with the New India. Presently, there are nearly 31 million overseas Indians globally, of which 13 million are PIOs and 17 million are NRIs. As rightly said, they are a part of India's dynamic and equitable growth. India looks forward to meaningfully engaging them in building a new India and being a stakeholder in the blueprint for India's success. To help us understand the issues related to Indian diaspora and engage them more effectively, FPRC invited distinguished and knowledgeable persons as well as Pravasi Bharatiya Samman awardees who played a vital role in building closer ties between the two countries to share their views on the subject. In the first part, we are joined by Shri Amit Vaikar, who is currently residing in China and is a Pravasi Bharatiya Samman awardee, Ambassador Lakhan Mehrotra, Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan, Ambassador Anil Trigunayas, Ambassador Manju Seth, and Ambassador Inder Chopra. We hope to have many more such presentations on the subject.
Hello and welcome to FPRC initiative, Say It with Video. FPRC invites distinguished policymakers, diplomats, academics, and media persons to express their views on a subject relating to India's foreign policy and relations. I am grateful to all these distinguished contributors to this project for having taken pains to send their video presentation at a very short notice. They have always been a source of strength to us. We hope to continue with this series or to discuss various issues relating to India's foreign policy and relations. Now, over to the distinguished panelists who have presented their video presentations.
नमस्कार, गुड आफ्टरनून एंड नी हाओ। मैं अमित वाइकर, मैं आप सबसे रूबरू हूँ शंघाई, चाइना से। प्रोफेसर महेंद्र गौर, ये फॉरेन पॉलिसी रिसर्च सेंटर न्यू दिल्ली, इन्होंने मुझे संपर्क किया था और मुझसे दरख्वास्त की थी कि मैं आप सबसे रूबरू हूँ और एक विषय जो है इंडियन डायस्पोरास पार्टनरशिप विद न्यू इंडिया, इस पे मेरे विचार आपके सामने पेश करूं, उन्हें आपके सामने रखूं। ये सचमुच एक बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट और प्रिविलिंग, जिसे कहते हैं, ऐसा प्रश्न है। इस प्रश्न का मेरे निजी जिंदगी में एक बहुत अहमियत रखता है, क्योंकि 2 साल पहले मुझे भारत सरकार ने माननीय राष्ट्रपति के हाथों प्रवासी भारतीय सम्मान पुरस्कार दिया था। ये गौरव ही नहीं है मेरे लिए ये एक संकेत है, अपनी मातृभूमि की तरफ से एक आदेश है कि मैं अपना हर संभव प्रयास करूं इस बारे में कि मेरे जैसे हजारों, लाखों, करोड़ों भारतवासी जो आज अपनी मातृभूमि से दूर अलग अलग देशों में स्थित है, बसे हुए हैं, उन्हें अपने इस नए उभरते हुए देश इन द न्यू इंडिया के इस प्रयास में और इस प्रोसेस में, इस प्रोग्रेस में इनका सहभाग, इनका पार्टनरशिप कैसे ली जाए। आई वॉज आस्क्ड दिस क्वेश्चन अ कपल ऑफ वीक्स बैक, और ये ख्याल मेरे मन में हमेशा रहा है। इस प्रश्न का उत्तर कि द रोल ऑफ इंडियन डायस्पोरा इन द न्यू इंडिया, इसे मैं 4 बहुत सिंपल, सादे शब्दों में आप सबके सामने रखना चाहूंगा। मेरा उत्तर यह है कि देयर आर 4 आई कॉल इट द 4 आई प्रिंसिपल। ये 4 आईज क्या है? द फर्स्ट आई इज इंडिया। मैं चाइना में स्थित हूं। चाइना और भारत के संबंधों के बारे में मुझे आप सबको बताने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है, पर जब भी मुझे यहां पूछा जाता है कि मैं कहां से हूं, तब मेरे मुंह से तो उत्तर यह निकलता है कि मैं भारत से हूं, मैं हिंदुस्तान से हूं, मैं इंडिया से हूं, आई बिलोंग टू इंडिया। पर मैं मेरे मन में हमेशा यह उत्तर देता हूं, आई एम इंडिया। मैं भारत हूं, मैं हिंदुस्तान हूं। ईच वन ऑफ अस हु इज स्टेइंग अब्रॉड, वी आर द ट्रू कल्चरल एम्बेसडर्स ऑफ आवर कंट्री। हमें देखकर और हम जिस तरह से यहां पे रहते हैं, द वे वी कॉन्ट्रीब्यूट, द वे वी लिव आवर लाइफ्स, उससे हर देश के नागरिक अपने देश के बारे में एक राय बनाते हैं। एंड वी ऑल नो दैट इन टुडेज डे एंड एज परसेप्शंस शेप रियलिटी। परसेप्शंस बहुत जरूरी है, और उन्हें पॉजिटिव परसेप्शंस अबाउट इंडिया ये करने में सबसे बड़ा योगदान हमारे इंडियन डायस्पोरा का हो सकता है। तो ये रहा फर्स्ट आई। दिस इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट आई अकॉर्डिंग टू मी। The second I of the 4 I principle that I have is interact. क्या हम सब लोग, और हम सब व्यस्त हैं, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है। मेरे जैसे लोग, मेरे जैसे कई हजारों जो बाहर मुल्कों में हैं, वो कई व्यस्त है अपनी अपनी निजी समस्याओं में, अपने काम में, अपने परिवारों में उलझे हुए हैं। पर डू वी टेक टाइम आउट टू इंटरैक्ट विद इंडिया? क्या हम वो समय निकालते हैं? और इंटरैक्शन किस तरह की होनी चाहिए? मैं आपको एक साधा एग्जाम्पल, एक उदाहरण आपके सामने पेश करता हूं। जरूरी नहीं है कि आप इसे फॉलो करें, पर इसी सोच को लेकर मैंने और हमारे कई मित्रों ने, और मैं उन सब का नाम यहां लेना चाहूंगा, नंद कुमार ढेकने, प्रद्युम्न इंगले, समीर डोरले, सुबोध जोशी, ऐसे कई लोग हम साथ आए और हमने एक विश्व मंथन, ये एक ग्रुप दोस्तों का, हम जिसे कहते हैं दोस्तों का, दोस्तों के लिए और फॉर म्यूचुअल प्रॉस्पेरिटी एंड गिविंग बैक टू इंडिया, इसे एस्टैब्लिश किया था 1 साल पहले। कोरोना का वक्त था, सब लोग घर पे थे और हमने चालू इंटरैक्शंस शुरू की भारत के, हम जिसे कह सकते हैं, थॉट लीडर्स के साथ। और देखते ही देखते हमारा 100, 150, 200 लोगों का एक बहुत बड़ा समूह बन गया है। हम 3 हफ्ते में एक बार मिलते हैं। और अब ये सिर्फ इंटरैक्शन ही नहीं रही है, इसमें से हमने कोई सोशल प्रोजेक्ट्स अपने हाथ में लिए हैं, कुछ इन्वेस्टमेंट्स हम भारत में कर रहे हैं। ये एक छोटा सा प्रयास है, बट दिस इज द सेकेंड आई, द इंटरैक्शन दैट वी नीड टू डू। द थर्ड आई, जो तीसरा आई मेरे इसमें है, वो है डू वी इन्वेस्ट इन इंडिया? आप सब लोगों को शायद पता होगा, और जिनको नहीं पता होगा उन्हें ये समझना और ये जानना बहुत जरूरी है कि आज भारत में जो स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम है, वैसा इकोसिस्टम ना पहले कभी था, और एक गोल्डन अपॉर्चुनिटी है हम जैसे लोगों के लिए, जो हम द एक्सपैट कम्युनिटी, द डायस्पोरा कम्युनिटी, टू रियली इन्वेस्ट इन दी स्टार्टअप्स। बहुत से ग्रुप्स हैं, बहुत से फोरम्स हैं, बहुत से स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम की कंपनियां हैं। मैं उनका नाम यहां नहीं लेना चाहता क्योंकि मैं किसी एक कंपनी को प्रमोट नहीं करना चाहूंगा, बट द स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम में आप सिर्फ अपना धन या पैसा नहीं लगा रहे हैं, आप एक सबसे बड़ी चीज उन्हें दे सकते हैं, आपका तजुर्बा, आपका एक्सपीरियंस, द अमाउंट ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस जो आपने यहां कमाया है। हमारे मराठी में एक शब्द है या एक लाइन है जो स्वतंत्र वीर सावरकर ने कही है, जे जे उत्तम उदात्त उन्नत। जो जो हमने बाहर रह के जो जो सबसे अप्रतिम, जो सबसे प्रोग्रेसिव, जो सबसे महान विशाल चीज देखी है, उससे अगर हम हमारे भारत भूमि के लिए वापस ला सके तो इससे बड़ी बात मेरे हिसाब से और कोई नहीं होगी। तो प्लीज, द थर्ड आई इज इन्वेस्ट, एंड द फोर्थ आई, probably the most important one, is do we inspire? Do we inspire the young minds that are there in India? Do we connect with them? उन लोगों को जिन्हें हमारी जरूरत है, जिन्हें हम एक दिशा दे सकते हैं, उन्हें हम पॉजिटिवली इंस्पायर करते हैं या नहीं? या विश्व मंथन के जरिए से हो, या मेरे इन्वेस्टमेंट्स के जरिए से हो, या जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं, मेरा एक विशेष ख्याल रखता हूं मैं हर जो स्टूडेंट्स के साथ कम्युनिकेट करने का, उनसे इंटरैक्ट करने का। अगर मुझे कभी भी न्योता आता है किसी भी जूम इनवाइट का, स्टूडेंट से इंटरैक्ट करने का, या किसी भी कॉलेज में हो भारत के, मैं तुरंत हाँ कहता हूं, क्योंकि वहां हम इंस्पायर कर सकते हैं। और सही बताऊं तो वो केवल इंस्पायर मैं उन्हें नहीं करता हूं, कभी कभी वो भी मुझे इंस्पायर करते हैं। दिस म्यूचुअल इंस्पिरेशन इज अ वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग। देयर इज प्रोबेबली, अगर हम भारत का इतिहास देखें पिछले 60-70 सालों का, तो जो इंडियन डायस्पोरा के साथ जो कनेक्ट आज की सरकार ने एस्टैब्लिश किया है, ऐसा कभी हुआ नहीं था। और इसकी नींव या इसका जो केंद्र बिंदु है वो है प्रवासी भारतीय दिवस। और प्रवासी भारतीय दिवस की शुरुआत या इसकी कल्पना की थी एक महान देश प्रेमी, हम सबके चहीते भारत रत्न श्री अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी ने। उन्होंने शायद पहली बार इस बात को समझा था कि ये जो इंडियन डायस्पोरा है, इसे अगर हम कलेक्टिवली भारत के विकास में जोड़ सके तो भारत की उन्नति निश्चित है। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में जब सरकार आई, तब इन्होंने इस बात को या इस कार्यक्रम को, इस प्रोग्राम को एक नई ऊंचाई पे ले गए हैं। और ये केवल 2 दिन का प्रोग्राम नहीं रहा है, अब ये एक साल भर का प्रोजेक्ट है, हर तरह से इंडियन डायस्पोरा को कनेक्ट करने के लिए। ये इकोनॉमिक कनेक्शंस है, ये कल्चरल कनेक्शंस है, एंड वी आर ऑल कल्चरल एम्बेसडर्स ऑफ इंडिया। तो अब कोई कारण नहीं है मेरे ख्याल में कि हम जैसे लोग हमारे मातृभूमि के साथ कनेक्ट ना हो पाए। चाइना जैसे देश में तो ये बहुत ज़रूरी है। आप सबको जान के शायद ताजुब होगा, आश्चर्य होगा कि भारतीयों की संख्या चाइना में काफ़ी कम है। हम शायद 70,000 भारतीय भारतीय है पूरे चाइना में। पर मैं हमेशा ये कहता हूँ कि हम तादाद में कम है, पर फिर भी हम में दम है। दम इसलिए है क्योंकि यहाँ पे 70,000 भारतीय किसी प्रांत से, किसी जाति से, किसी समाज से नहीं बिलोंग करते हैं, या वो कभी ऐसा विचार नहीं करते। वो सिर्फ एक ही विचार रहता है, हम भारतीय है, वी आर इंडियंस। जब ये समाज बढ़ जाता है, जैसे हम देखते हैं यूएस में या यूरोप में, तब लाजिम है कि क्षेत्रीयता, प्रांतीयता, भाषा, ये इन चीज़ों के मायने बदल जाते हैं। लोग अपने अपने ग्रुप्स में, समूहों में रहना पसंद करते हैं, पर चाइना में ऐसा नहीं है। चाइना में कुछ प्रश्न हैं जिन्हें हम मिल के सॉल्व करने का प्रयत्न कर रहे हैं। आज सबसे बड़ा प्रश्न ये है कि मेरे कई भारतीय भाई बहनें आज भी भारत में फंसे हुए हैं, जिनकी नौकरी, जिनका रोजगार चाइना में है। भारत सरकार उन्हें यहाँ लाने का बहुत प्रयत्न कर रही है, चाइनीज सरकार के साथ बातें चल रही है, और यही आशा करता हूँ, ये दुआ करता हूँ, ये उम्मीद करता हूँ कि जल्द से जल्द इन लोगों को वापस यहाँ लाया जा सके, इनके लिए फ्लाइट्स रिज्यूम हो जाए, इनको वीज़ाज मिले, और ये लोग यहाँ आके जब काम करेंगे तब यकीन जानिए कि ये काम भी भारत के लिए ही है। इसमें से कई लोग मेरे जैसे हैं जो कुछ कंपनियों में काम कर रहे हैं। चाइनीज़ कंपनियां और मल्टीनेशनल कंपनियां जो आज चाइना में है, आप सब लोगों ने सुना होगा China+1 पॉलिसी है। ये कई लोग आज बड़े कंपनियों में हैं, और ये लोग कहीं ना कहीं इन बड़े कंपनियों को ये मैसेज, ये बात पहुंचा रहे हैं कि अगर आपको इन्वेस्ट करना है चाइना के बाहर तो भारत में कीजिए। ये मेरे हिसाब से एक बहुत बड़ा बड़ा काम हम यहाँ पे कर सकते हैं, हम सब लोग मिलकर कर सकते हैं। ऐसे कई बातें हैं जो आपसे करना चाहता था। आज मुझे सौभाग्य मिला है कि आप सबसे रूबरू हो पाऊँ, और इसके लिए मैं आप सबका धन्यवाद कहता हूँ। मैं प्रोफेसर साहब का पुनश्च धन्यवाद करता हूँ, और आप सबसे फिर एक बार विदा लेता हूँ, इसी आशा के साथ कि दोबारा आपसे फिर कनेक्ट हो पाऊँ, आपसे फिर बात कर पाऊँ। धन्यवाद, शेषे एंड जय हिंद।
I am very thankful to the Foreign Policy Research Center to invite me to participate in this discussion on Indian diaspora. The 18 million strong Indian diaspora has been a very important bastion of support to India politically, economically and socially for more than a century now. Throughout my travels round the globe, as a member of the Indian Foreign Service, as Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Africa, and finally as UN Secretary General's personal envoy in Southeast Asia, I came across people of Indian origin with their hearts glued to India. It did not matter whether they had been living in their new habitat for centuries or decades. Time had neither eroded their love for India nor their sense of belonging to it. In many ways, their values and culture and living style hark back to their roots in India. For all their differences of language, creed, or the region of India they came from, India sticks to them, to use a phrase from Nehru's Discovery of India. It is worth recalling that India's struggle for freedom was morally and spiritually and materially very healthily and strongly supported by Indian communities abroad. At every step and in whatever manner or to whichever extent possible, they had helped to foster a conducive climate for independence in their respective countries. This applied to those residing in the United Kingdom and its colonies, as well as in the USA and elsewhere. The Indian community in USA was able to garner support for India's freedom from no less a person than President Roosevelt, despite USA's extremely close relations with UK. It was quite natural, therefore, that after gaining independence, India followed a policy of maintaining close links with the Indian diaspora. On their part, the latter have continued to invest in India's growth and prosperity, have offered it great support on issues critical to its unity and integrity, and in their own way helped its stature grow in the Committee of Nations as a major factor in international relations. However, there has always been scope to do more. Undoubtedly, there are misguided elements amongst the PIOs who stand against India's unity and territorial integrity, like the so-called Khalistanis, or proponents of an independent state of Kashmir, or its becoming a part of Pakistan. Occasionally, they raise their head and often seek to exploit agitations in India for their own pernicious ends, utilizing their rights to free expression and protest granted to them constitutionally in the countries where they live. Further, countries such as China and Pakistan, which would like to see India break apart, are quite prone to use these groups to their own ends. One has therefore to move with caution when dealing with such situations. For example, dealing a little more sympathetically with the demands of the farmers who continued to protest suspending the new farm laws, taking a cue from the Supreme Court's judgment on the issue and giving legal validity to MSP. That would considerably silence the critics of India's policy amongst the Indian diaspora. That apart, the government of India and its missions abroad might more effectively galvanize the large majority of Indian diaspora committed to see India united and strong to meet the challenge of disruptive elements within it. Unfortunately, some very friendly countries in the world have recently shown a shift from a policy of containing such elements to a more sympathetic attitude towards them. Canada is a case in point. More effective persuasion might be required to influence them to change course. As far as the issue of J&K is concerned, a more complex issue, the state had enjoyed a special status for 70 years under a purely temporary provision inserted in the Constitution of India at the time of the state's accession to India. 7 decades is a long enough time for a temporary measure to last. The Constitutional Amendment Act, passed by the Parliament to remove that status, had to come some time or the other. Simultaneously, however, being more considerate and fast about restoring the status of Jammu and Kashmir to that of a full-fledged state governed by its elected representatives might go a ways in denting or taking the edge off the criticism of India's Kashmir policy in the Indian diaspora. This is important. Of late, a sentiment has been growing in the Indian diaspora that the government of India's policies are divisive in character. It is fueled by lynching episodes and more recently by a sustained campaign against what is branded as love jihad. Some BJP-ruled states in India have passed legislation against it, which is being interpreted by the Indian diaspora especially in West Asia and the Middle East, as an instrument to victimize the minority community. The arrest of the entire political leadership of Kashmir in the wake of CAA was also seen in that light, and not just by members of the minority community. These instances are increasingly viewed as illustrative of the Government of India's aggressive pursuit of Hindutva and evidence of a departure from its professed secular credentials. This trend needs to be combated by effective measures at home and abroad. The government might more strenuously illustrate with fact and evidence its genuinely democratic and secular credentials and policy. Not only might such an effort will have intrinsic value, it will also be better for ensuring that the sizable remittances by the Indian communities abroad continue without change as before. When I was secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs in the early 1990s, one came across a strong voice from important segments of the Indian diaspora, especially in the United States, United Kingdom, and the countries of Europe, to allow the people of Indian origin abroad, dual nationality. I remember MEA supporting that move, and I personally speaking to Mr. Naresh Chandra, Cabinet Secretary, in favor of that policy. However, the move was shot down by the Home Ministry. It took the Government of India several more years to extend a special status to the people of Indian origin abroad. However, the populations of Indian origin abroad remain dissatisfied with the way that policy has been implemented on the ground. The Indian diaspora would like to be treated on par with Indian citizens for visits to India, engaging in business enterprises in India, engaging in professional services in India, and so forth. One of the elements, it should be remembered, fueling China's rise as a major force in world affairs and a power only next to the United States of America, has been China's relentless pursuit to attract professionals of Chinese origin abroad, placing them in critical areas of development, including scientific, technical, and technological fields, and giving them the scope to work for the betterment of China and its prospects at home and abroad. In comparison, India has been lagging behind. Obtaining the constant and wholehearted engagement of Indians abroad in professional terms would appear absolutely critical to the attainment of an Atmanirbhar Bharat. I therefore suggest that immediate steps are taken towards that attitude. During my time as President of the Antarrashtriya Sahyog Parishad, and after my retirement from the Indian Foreign Service, Baleshwar Prasad Ji, the founder and the leading light of ARSP, put great pressure on Prime Minister Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government to create a new ministry to deal with Pravasis so as to use their full potential in support of India's advancement and growth. In an address to ARSP, Mr. Advani, Deputy Prime Minister, agreed to explore that idea. We were happy that the Government of India and the that the Government of India eventually created a special division in the Ministry of External Affairs under a special secretary to deal with PIOs. Finally, Atal Bihari ji also laid the foundation of Pravasi Bhavan in Delhi at ARSP's initiative as a place for PIOs to park themselves while exploring their roots in various parts of India and strengthening their ties with India. They were also encouraged to invest their savings in India, which they have done in billions of dollars over the years. Notwithstanding these factors, however, there remains some discontent in the Indian diaspora regarding the Government of India's outreach towards them, some of them complaining that their contact with India's missions abroad has been virtually non-existent. While the current pandemic makes it difficult for our missions and posts to be in clear touch with the Indian diaspora in their respective countries at the present moment, this kind of feeling amongst them, however, precedes the COVID times. The challenge might, however, be turned into an opportunity by finding means to more regularly connect them to the news and information from India, which is unbiased and in which they can put their full faith, and to drawing their attention to the possibility of participating in virtual events, including panels of short duration, which are easy to organize. I might mention, and history tells us that this should be possible. During the years that followed our independence, the Ministry of External Affairs put out information bulletins that contained a summary of both the government's views and policies as well as of those who differed with them. This spoke volumes about India's faith in the strength of its democracy. The members of the diaspora are now left to follow the media with its own biases, including a very heavy focus on local politics as opposed to international news and events. India's representatives abroad and the missions of India abroad are committed to follow and propagate the policies of the Government of India. But they might recall that the heads of missions are appointees of the President of India, and it is their pious duty to make certain that the basic features, the fundamental character of the Constitution of India is placed before the people with complete faith in its various elements. That is, such as guaranteeing justice, liberty and equality for all, protecting the right to free expression and speech, which includes freedom to peacefully demonstrate and to dissent. Such a procedure used to carry great conviction with the people of Indian origin abroad, and I think that this is also the time when this feature should be encouraged by the Government of India and should be adopted by the Ministry of External Affairs in its communications with the Indian diaspora. I thank once again the Foreign Policy Research Center for the opportunity that they have given me to participate in this discussion. Thank you very much.
Speaking of the Indian diaspora, the first point I'd like to make is that it was Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi who made a change in India's diaspora policy. In return for his request to many distinguished Indians to come back and work here, he pledged that if ever there was any problem for Indians settled abroad, Government of India would go to their rescue. The first crisis that happened was in Fiji, where a military coup disenfranchised the Indians who were there for more than 150 years ago. So we not only imposed sanctions against Fiji, but also got Fiji out of the Commonwealth by the personal efforts of the Prime Minister. Before this, the policy of the Government of India was to advise Indian immigrants to owe their loyalty to their countries of adoption and be in touch emotionally and culturally with India. So as a result of this new policy, the diaspora started getting active on Indian issues, and in response, several measures were taken in order to give them facilities like the PIO card, overseas Indian citizenship, etc. The diaspora's support to the Government of India is not automatic. There are differences among them on political lines in India, and therefore sometimes a part of the diaspora would be critical of the Government of India. But generally they have been supportive of Indian policy. They have been critical when they felt that India was not doing enough. But over these years, with the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas and Pravasi Bharatiya Saman and various interactions with the diaspora, there is a greater understanding, and this has been beneficial to us. The diaspora makes various demands, and that is how the PIO card was established. Then the Indian overseas citizenship, etc., were provided. But they still want dual citizenship, which has been a demand made particularly by people of Indian origin in USA and UK. The problem here is that under the Indian Constitution, dual citizenship is not possible because dual loyalty is considered not possible. But there are some countries who give dual citizenship to the countries, to their citizens, and this has been a demand which the Indian diaspora is very diverse, not only in their composition, but also in terms of lifestyles and the kind of relationship that they have with their countries of adoption. Of course, in the Gulf, most Indians hold Indian passports and they require several facilities, and they'll all eventually come back, but they make their remittances, etc. But in countries like the United States, they wield great influence among the people of the United States as well as in the government, and on issues like India's nuclear tests and later the nuclear deal, etc. They played a big role in assisting India. And they have also been given various facilities by the Government of India. So the relationship between the diaspora and India has been very helpful for India and also for themselves to have a better relationship with the countries concerned. After Prime Minister Narendra Modi took over, there has been particular emphasis on the Indian diaspora, and he has expected them not only to contribute to India, but also to help build India's image abroad. So his first visit to New York and later
The Indian diaspora is probably one of the most successful and very well liked across the world. They have actually achieved the kind of heft that a nation needs in order to leverage it to its own advantage as well as for the success and development of the nations where these are located. Nearly 3 million Indians, 30 million Indians across the world have been doing India proud. They have become the living bridges between India and the countries of their choice. They have also provided India with tremendous opportunities and possibilities. I remember when I was posted in New York in the early 90s, immediately after the economic reforms, that we were very ably helped by very enthusiastic, highly placed Indians in multinational corporations, and they were actually instrumental in bringing about large investments into India, technology transfer, as well as big financial houses and the companies to look at India. And they were themselves personally driving these. And that's what this can be a great importance, and they can be of great use for the nation. And this precisely has happened everywhere. Now they have gone in 3 or 4 phases from the 16th, 17th centuries onwards. And today, when we look at them, whether in the UK, whether in the USA or Canada or in different other aspects and countries, we find them virtually everywhere. I mean, people say that nearly 25% of the scientists in NASA are of Indian origin. If you see in the United States, they are the wealthiest, the highest per capita income. They are very successful professionals, businessmen, farmers across the world. And therefore, we can use them. Coming nearer home in West Asia, for example, in the Gulf countries, we have over 9 million of them. And they range from blue-collar worker to the whitest of all. And that is what is that they are the big businessmen, they are the richest in their countries. And Indian, whether it is labor or it is a professional, the best part is that they are liked by their host country leaders everywhere. And that has come out very clearly during the interactions one had. But have we been able to leverage them to the best of our ability, or can we do much more? Yes, we can do much more. So far, they have tried not to invest so much in India by the NRIs themselves. Policies have been leveraged for them. We have created the OCI card. They used to have always this requirement or a protest or a request that India should have a dual nationality, which we do not provide. But OCI is virtually as much as that, because except for fighting for the political office, they can virtually have everything in India under these rules. So rules have been provided at the same level as an average Indian as far as the NRIs or the PIOs are concerned. They have a lifelong visa in terms of these OCI cards. So they have these facilities available. They get access to the Indian educational institutions. They can now invest in any field. They can hold properties. They can do anything in that field. So they can use India, but the technology as well as the capital flows where there is the best potential of it is. So therefore, the best practices also can be brought about by those countries and these Indians from their countries of residence, and they can be a good bridge. Now, as we are moving towards the AI-driven Industrial Revolution 4.0, I think the technology is going to play an immense role. And there I feel that the use of our Indian diaspora could be really critical and crucial. And that's what, when we had this scheme of Know India, or for example, Web, the biggest event where people from 70 countries, scientists from 70 countries participated, and they are mostly Indian origin, and they are ready to be a bridge between India and their countries of residence, and came up with several good projects. And I think that is something that is extremely important. Secondly, as you know, that the Indians also should be encouraged, because India's soft power revolution, which we call software power, IT, is actually driven mainly by the Indians, whether they are in Silicon Valley or elsewhere, or they are 95 in the USA. They are the ones who actually started looking at. But at that time, our infrastructure was not so good, and which was not even needed that much. And therefore, the IT revolution really put India on that map. And I think they have done so, and they can do so much more now also. Likewise, India also has done tremendously well for its own people. And not only that, the remittances are nearly 10% of India's total foreign exchange reserves, but they look to India. And India is only one country where you had one foreign minister in Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, who was called the people's foreign minister. She was always available for the people. India was organizing these Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, mini Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, regional and different parts, trying to connect with the diaspora. But frankly, when I saw myself and I was mentoring a group of researchers, and they did a study on this, and I found that nearly 60 to 70% of the people abroad, or the youngsters, did not feel that connected with our system, or were not even aware about various policies that we have devised for them. And therefore, there was a greater need for doing this. And I'm happy that only in the very recently held 16th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas that was held here in Delhi virtually, in that one, the government launched a portal called Rishta, that is connecting with one another. Likewise, they have created something called Swadesh. That means for the people who were brought back under the Vande Bharat missions because of the pandemic, because of the problems that were happening, they were losing their jobs. So when those people came back, earlier there was no system of keeping track of those people, but they would be required to go back. So what the government did was essentially created something of a portal whereby they entered the whole data, giving their own requirements exactly. What are their capabilities, what are their skill sets, how they can be matched in India and abroad, and which is a very good tool, because that is what is going to provide these people also a comfort level that they can always go back. Secondly, you have a database which provides you that, okay, X number of people. But we must also remember that as far as Gulf is concerned, it is also changing very fast, where we have the largest number of people located in a very small area. And therefore, it is important that we have to reskill our people to go back there, so that when they go back, they are able to come not in the lowest strata, but in the highest strata. Today, they are the bankers, they are doctors, they have entrepreneurs. We have thousands of companies operating out of this. They have emerged as our second largest set of trading partners. A lot of investments is expected from these countries. They are very important for our energy security. Indians do play a very, very important role in keeping these links alive. And I think that for the tech startups, for innovation, they will be very, very useful. Of course, one says that they could be a bane or they could be an asset. They are indeed a big asset. But if we are going to think recently, for example, we looked at Ms. Kamala Harris becoming the Vice President of the United States. She has partially of Indian origin, or about 20 other members who have been included in President Biden's cabinet of Indian origin. Now, do you look at them as Indians? Indeed, of Indian origin. They are Americans first. They will think about American value systems first. So our expectations also should be calibrated to what extent they can be useful. They indeed, at some point of time, if there is a question of trying to help India, I'm quite sure they might help. But if we look at that, they will drive it. That will not be, in my view, a desirable expectation from them. But we have to make ourselves country as strong so that Indians feel proud that I'm an Indian. I remember that at one time it was not the case. People thought I'm a Bihari, I'm a Bengali, I'm this. So they're divided. And accordingly, when you go abroad, you will see all kinds of association based on ethnicity, on the region from where, or linguistic affiliations from where the people are coming. And that is sort of a division. But when it comes to India, they should be able to think about India and where our embassies can play a much greater role. And I believe that Indian ambassadors should have some kind of an advisory council from out of the diaspora around successful people and the politically oriented people, the people who are from the civil society groups and others, so that they can continue. There is a constant interaction and the two-way possibilities. Because see, in the US, if you're going to work, it is a country that works in lobbies. It is a country that works on interest groups. where people are ready to listen to you, provided you have a way of reaching out to them. And that's where they can be of great help. But personally, I have had a great run. I have served in USA, I have served in Africa, I have served in the Middle East. And I find that the Indians everywhere are amazing. Some places you have to help them, you have to evacuate them. I have been in conflict zones from where we had evacuated thousands of Indians, and the Indian government has in different places done the most for them. But I remember once I was in Nigeria, and it had never happened before, and suddenly we heard that the 3 Indians in the oil region in the south were picked up and kidnapped. And we were wondering as to what to do, and finally we found out. And no, Indians are generally seen as innocuous, will not bother. They are not even targeted by anybody, even though in Africa, a large number of them in different countries really control the economies and the industry in those countries. But they have developed a good rapport with the local people, and they are the 3rd, 4th generation Indians. So we tried to find out and eventually tried to get them released. That was my first time that getting out of kidnapping. So there was 1 Italian, 1 British, and 1 Indian. You will not be surprised that when they came to know he was an Indian and working in an oil company, the kidnappers, the Nigerians themselves, they asked for money, for everybody. But the way this guy was looked after, in fact, he was tired, so they even took him on his back through the ravines. So when he came back, I had a debriefing with him, and he was very happy. He said, I was looked after very well. So this was because of the connection that India had. I was in Mongolia. In Mongolia, the Indians were looked at just because Lord Buddha was born. So Indians were respected and loved like anything. This is precisely the same thing if you go to the Gulf countries. If they will compare any labor, any place, our labor may not be very well trained, but they are well behaved. They do not indulge in any local politics compared to some of the neighboring countries, and they are always preferred. And this has been told by the leaders to the Prime Minister. In different parts, the Indians are industrious. They are an asset. They know how to adjust in the societies where they are, and therefore they are a big asset for us. Of course, there are misguided Indians. We have seen it in what happened in Canada, in US, and some other places where they might foment trouble in various parts of India, and they're misguided people. They have their own agendas. They need to be contented, and that is one of the roles that the remainder of the diaspora can play. And this is what we need to have. We have a greater dynamic interaction with the diaspora. I'm happy that in the Gulf, most of our embassies have these open days where anybody can come complain or address the issues. They conduct camps in different cities. They reach out to the people, and they're available to them in their difficult periods. And government has changed a lot of rules to help them, to provide them assistance, financial and otherwise, to bring them back from difficult conditions, to sign agreements with those countries so that our people can be very carefully located. So India is doing, but I think what is required, and which I saw through our own studies that we had submitted to External Affairs Ministry as well, is that gap, if there is any gap, must be filled, and we must take it forward. They are an asset, and let us work with them more closely. Thank you.
India has one of the largest diaspora in the world, about 32 million it is estimated across different countries, and it is also, as per the World Bank, one of the highest receivers of remittance every year from its diaspora. And of course, as you're all aware, India has both the old diaspora and the new diaspora. The dollar diaspora in the West, in the US mainly, and of course in the Gulf diaspora, and in Europe and across the world, we have different categories. The indentured labor, those whose forefathers went as indentured labor, and who went for trade more than 100 years ago, across in Africa, in the Indian Ocean. So that we've got a myriad variety of diaspora across the world, and their origins are different. And it's quite fascinating the way, how they traveled across the world. They went with the, when in a particular season they sailed out, and when the rains, when the sea was favorable coming back to India, they would sail back, and they would, trade across the world to many countries across oceans. And it is and mainly, it is very interesting that it was mainly the Gujarati businessmen who were, the really sort of adventurous kinds, who went all over the world, and initially who went across the world and did business. So it is our diaspora is varied and myriad, and different kinds of diaspora you will find across the world. First generation, second generation, third generation, even fourth generation, and all with their different experiences, different levels of prosperity. And increasingly we see now that they are really doing well. Majority across the world are doing very well in where they've got, completely. And again, one more point, we have the NRIs, who are non-resident Indians, who retain their Indian nationality, and the others who are their nationals, they're nationals of their host countries, and have either OCI card holders, or maybe just without OCI. They are, just living as citizens of that country, completely integrated. So we have these diaspora wanting to connect with India, and India has also adopted the 4 C's: care, caring for them, contacting them, giving them, helping them to connect with India, and celebrating the diaspora, and that and that is done mainly through the PBDs held every 2 years now. Earlier it was annual, now it's held every 2 years. And the theme this year of the PBD that was held, the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, that was held on 9th January this year in 2021, the theme was how the diaspora can engage with India and contribute to Atmanirbhar Bharat. It's a very interesting theme or an interesting idea, but it's not new, not absolutely new, because we have in place various policies that we had put in place, and facilitation centers were put in place. Like we have the India Foundation, Development Foundation, which was meant, the IDF, which was meant to encourage philanthropy and help them set up and set up foundations here and in India, and contribute to development, social and social development in India. And you have the OIFC, the Overseas Indians Facilitation Center, which was meant to be a one-window stop for investments and encouraging investments and foreign direct investment into various sectors in India. And other one-window and facilitation schemes and incentives have been put in place. But the reason I feel that it has not taken off as it should have is because they are not familiar with Indian methodology or working. And if you're a really huge, big investor, huge company like the other foreign multinationals, they are able to hire like the Ernst & Young or some other advisory company which does everything for them. For the mid-level diaspora, mid-level investor diaspora, definitely we need to put in systems in place so that they're not taken for a ride. There have been some instances where they've been, made fools of, and so they're very wary about investing in India. So individual investors, of course, some are investing now on the stock exchange, but they want to invest in projects, they want to invest and partner with Indian companies, smaller companies, and but they want someone to take care of that. They don't want to be involved in the day-to-day running, and they've invested and they want that the management be done, and be done by the local partner. But at the same time, they need some mechanism under which a mechanism or some authority or some organization which will monitor and ensure and vet their investments and vet their local partners before they go ahead. So knowledge transfer, of course, the various things that are required in India for Atmanirbhar Bharat is, of course, for for knowledge transfer. And there are many small entrepreneurs, startups in India. Women entrepreneurs need to be encouraged. SMEs and MSMEs who need investments and who need hand-holding. Many technology startups are there, and we know that our diaspora in the US is doing extremely well, and most of the startups are, a large proportion of the startups in the US, even in Europe, are driven by diaspora, Indian diaspora. And so they need to partner with Indian startups, Indian small companies, Indian MSMEs to bring about transformation and win-win situations, both for the Indian domestic market and for export, for coming up with products which can be useful both within the country and outside. The other thing is that Atmanirbhar doesn't mean everything has to be invested in India. We also need to invest outside and bring technology into India, or we can benefit with the joint research outside. And so Indian companies also and Indian investors also need to invest outside with diaspora companies outside, and see how we can create supply chains which are win-win for everybody. So it is not necessary that I feel that it should only be one way, it should be both ways, because in any case we should not insulate ourselves and isolate ourselves in today's globalizing world. A little bit of isolationism and inward looking is okay, but not completely. And even for Atmanirbhar Bharat, we need a two-way flow, because our sense of self comes from not only our sense of self of a nation comes not only from what we are giving outside, but what we are also receiving, and what is the image of India. And that needs to be a very positive image, and we need to ensure that we are not here only to take, but also to give. So a two-way move, a two-way sort of transaction, let me call it, or two-way movement of investors and investing between the diaspora and India will be definitely a win-win for both sides. And we need, there's artificial technology, there is so much happening, blockchain happening, and we can utilize that in our textile sector, we can use it in our agriculture sector for real-time management of the different steps which are involved in all these, in the textile industry, in the agricultural sector, so that we can really take the next leap, kind of technology leap in all these spheres, so that there is prosperity and the poorest in the country are benefited, and that our foreign policy, or any country's foreign policy, is dependent or is underpinned by its domestic politics, domestic policy. Everybody, there has to be political consensus, and say in the areas of defense or sovereignty, or for India's interest to be maintained at all times. So it is, domestic policy will always, even Atmanirbhar is a kind of domestic policy where we are saying the focus should be on India and go vocal for local. So all that impinges on foreign policy. Everything within the country, its economic development, its what it does for its poor, how it gets poor, the large majority out of poverty, all that does impinge on foreign policy, always and every time. And on our foreign policy includes economic policy and trade policy. And so it is all interconnected, science, diplomacy, COVID, during times of COVID we have seen it. So all aspects of foreign policy are always, foreign policy and domestic policy are interacting, and the basic or the base point is that it is in India's, it should be in the overall interest of India. And also we find, just a little bit about my experience with the various diaspora that I've interacted with in my postings in different countries. Again, the diaspora is varied, as I mentioned. And a word about the Francophone or the French-speaking diaspora. They feel connected to India, but because India is English-speaking, Anglophone, so there is a little hesitancy on their part. And they really want to connect, and they have connected. For instance, in Reunion Island, it's amazing that you see so many beautiful temples and Indian, to various gods and goddesses, and the cultural connect is so strong, and they love coming to India. Initially, they didn't want to come, of course. Didn't want in the sense they were unable to come. They didn't know India, and they were hesitant because they couldn't speak the language. Many more are now speaking in English, and so they are able to connect much more closely. But at the same time, they have been requesting that they be facilitated for some, many of the big business people want to import from India products from here. In Madagascar as well, that's also Francophonie, a Francophonie country, as well as Mauritius. Mauritius is both Anglophone and Francophone, but also they would want facilitation in French so that they understand the laws, and some facilitation and some hand-holding provided to them, connecting them with Indian companies, Indian investors as well. And for university collaborations, there's a lot of interest. And it is a fascinating, it's different. The Francophone diaspora is different from the Anglophone, but again, they are very, very positive, want to connect. There's a great need to connect with India and Indians culturally, politically, in every respect. And many of them are doing very well. Mauritius has been able to connect with us because, they are both Francophone and Anglophone speaking. And so they had that advantage. And of course, Bhojpuri and Hindi and everything, they're very multilingual. But in France, in Reunion Island, in Madagascar, it's not the case. And so there is a little aspiration that we do complete hand-holding, and we help them also, they help their companies, and the richer ones want to import, the ones who are doing very well, they want to import from India, they want to have collaborations with India in different spheres, or have, in the IT sector, they've been asking for facilitation that they can benefit, and or they can be educated, their children can be educated in IT in our universities. But again, language becomes an issue. And so these are all part of the Atmanirbhar aspects which we should look at. And I do hope that India is able to leverage its strengths and its huge diaspora for a mutually win-win outcome. Thank you.
Hello friends, it is a pleasure to discuss with you about Indian diaspora, a subject quite close to my heart. According to UN report, with 18 million Indians living abroad, the Indian diaspora is one of the most vibrant, dynamic, and the largest in the world. Indians are living nearly in all the countries of the world. Let me say at the very outset that the Indian diaspora is a big asset for India. Indians living abroad sent $18 billion as a remittance in 2019, which made India the largest recipient of remittance in the world. In addition to remittance, they have become an effective soft power of India. Most Indians living abroad are well educated, law-abiding, and very productive citizens of the countries of their adoption. For example, in the USA, 79% of the Indian immigrants over age of 25 are holding at least bachelor degree, compared to 33% of both US-born and all immigrants. Indian immigrants are in much higher income group. In 2019, household headed by Indian immigrants had a median income of $132,000 compared to $64 and $66 for all the immigrant and US households. The Indians have made their presence felt at the political scene in many of the developed countries. In USA, Kamala Devi Harris, Nikki Haley, Bobby Jindal, and many others in the US Congress, states and city councils make India feel proud of their achievements. Many Indians are heading Fortune 500 companies. They not only project very positive image of India, but have become powerful instrument of strengthening bilateral relations. In my today's talk, I'm going to talk to you about Indian diaspora in the Caribbean. Not much is known about them, how, why, and when they had gone to these far off places. It is a fascinating story. Just like any Bollywood movie, a life full of hardships, miseries, and brutalities on one side, perseverance, faith in one's ethos, social and cultural values, which encourage the Indian to come out successfully in the end. I was privileged to have been Ambassador of India in Suriname, High Commissioner of India to Trinidad and Tobago, and High Commissioner of India to Jamaica, where the Indians form very high portion of the local population. These assignments gave me first-hand opportunity to observe and interact with them. I was deeply touched and impressed by their capacity to suffer and to retain their cultural heritage and make progress in life. As I said, it is a fascinating story, so I would like to tell this story from the very beginning. Interestingly, it began in the last decade of 15th century, when the Ottoman Empire had blocked land route to India, which stopped lucrative trade in spice, silk, and hoard of other goods. The European powers' endeavors were to find alternative sea route to India. Christopher Columbus, with the support of Queen Isabella of Spain, set out on 3rd August 1492 on his adventure. Columbus didn't find India, but he discovered the new world in the Caribbean and called it Indies. That's India. There were strong rumors that newly discovered territories were full of wealth and gold. This attracted other European powers to the region. After a series of wars and defeat of Spanish Armada, the British broke the monopoly of power of the Spanish in the Caribbean and occupied many islands. The French and Dutch followed the suit and occupied some of the islands. The European power didn't find gold in these territories, but found tropical weather and fertile land ideal for cultivation. They started first the cultivation of tobacco, and then sugar. Both these commodities were exported to Europe. Agriculture is labor intensive. The natural population was decimated by the European. Need for labor was met by bringing poor white men and even convicts from Europe. This source of manpower was totally inadequate. The Europeans resorted to one of the most brutal and inhuman practice of slavery. African natives were hunted, trapped, shipped, and sold like animals in the New World. This system came to be known as transatlantic slavery. Under this system, masters had the complete control over their slaves. They were treated as their property, just like cattle. The slaves didn't have any right to their own life and their progeny. The terrible system of slavery was brought to end in 1830s. Free slaves showed disinclination to work on the plantation. Plantation again were confronted with the problem of manpower. Plantocracy, as the ownership of the plantation had come to be known, were very powerful and influential. They persuaded the British and the Indian government to send manpower from India. Economic, political, social conditions of India in the 19th century were terrible. The revenue reforms and the policy of the British to suppress the local industry, followed by famines, had caused all-round miseries. Poverty, hunger, and disease were rampant. In this environment, British government in India pushed thousands of poor and feeble Indians to far-off unknown places. It may be mentioned that at that time, going abroad and crossing the sea was a taboo for Indians. A system of indentured labor was introduced, whereby Indian labor were contracted for 5 years with provision for return passage after expiry of the contract period. The system came to be known as indentured labor. A network of architects, middlemen or recruiters was organized. The architects were paid by the number of persons they recruited. Fees for recruiting women were higher than that of men. The architects employed all modes of inducement, even fraud and deception, to recruit unsuspected poor people. Melas, religious and social get-togethers, marketplaces were the hunting grounds for the architects. Recruited people were taken to a depot in Calcutta, where they waited till the arrival of the ship to take them to these far-off islands. The indentured Indian faced long and hazardous voyage. Many lost their lives en route. In one of the sailings, 30% of the passengers died. On arrival in the new destination, they were confronted with hostile working conditions. They were housed in the same barracks which were used by the slaves. Living conditions were miserable. Healthcare was negligible. Mortality rate was very high. In addition to all these hardships, they had to suffer considerable humiliations as indentured labor. They were derogatorily called coolies. Their situation was not different to erstwhile slaves. The only difference was that the period of the slavery for them was limited to 5 years. After completion of indentured period of 5 years, British rulers offered a plot of land in lieu of return passage. The intention was to retain the indentured workers in the country so that their labor would be available to the plantation. Most of the Indians accepted the offer. Thus began a period of settlement for the Indians. New batches of the indentured labor continued to come. Social condition of the free Indian was not any better. They were looked down upon and despised both by the white and the black. They were discriminated against. Marriages performed as per Hindu or Muslim rites were not recognized. Hindu could not cremate the dead bodies, nor they could have their places of worship. They suffered in silence, but defied all the efforts to deprive them of their cultural heritage. They remained totally committed to their way of life and their cultural values. Slowly but steadily, the Indians continued to improve their economic situation. With ownership of the land, they moved to form villages and communities of their own. They introduced wheat cultivation in the West Indies. They ventured into transport business, starting with donkey and bullock carts, later to vans and buses. In 1878, the Canadian Presbyterian Mission started a school for the Indian children. The real object of the mission was to convert Indians to Christianity. Naturally, there was resistance among the Indians in sending their children to the Christian schools. Slowly, this resistance weakened and a new window of advancement for Indians through education was opened. The mission opened many more schools for Indians with the support of the government and sugar estates. 1870 to 1900 can be considered as a period of emergence of Indian community in the West Indies, and the years from 1900 to 1920 would be called years of consolidation. This is evident from the fact that in Trinidad, about 56,000 acres of crown land was owned by Indians in 1900. Their ownership of land increased to 75,000 in 1914 and nearly 96,000 acres in 1921. 60% of the land owned by the Indians was used for cash crop like cacao and balance for sugarcane, rice and vegetable. The end of 19th century saw the Indians in Trinidad coming out of their shell. In 1897, they formed East Indian National Association to protect and project their interests. The first Indian journal, Kohinoor Gazette, was launched on 4th October 1898. A political party, East Indian National Congress, in 1908. They were proud to have first Indian Trinidad-born Indian as a barrister of law in 1904. Both the Hindu and Muslim Indians also started forming religious organizations to celebrate various festivals. While the things were looking up for the Indians in the Caribbean, Mahatma Gandhi's sojourn in South Africa brought the plight of Indian indentured labor there to the notice of Indian nation. There was strong agitation to bring this system to an end. Finally, the British rulers agreed to put an end to the indentureship in 1917. It may be of interest for you to know that the delegation of Indians from Trinidad, Guyana and Suriname came to India to plead with the Indian Congress leaders to allow flow of the Indian labor to this country. They informed that the things were not so bad in the Caribbean, but they failed in their efforts. I think the Indian leaders had not fully appreciated the situation in their insistence in bringing this system to an end. There was need and scope for reforms in the system. Bringing it to an end was not a solution. Despite the hardship and discrimination, around 80% of the Indian immigrants in these Caribbean countries, where largest number of Indian population settled, decided to stay on after expiry of the indenture period. They realized with the acquisition of land, The possibilities of upward social mobility were much better in the Caribbean than back in India. It is a fact that the people who came to the Caribbean, despite all the hardship, have done better for themselves and their children than their kith and kin whom they have left behind in India. I would like to share with you two anecdotes. First, one was told to me by Gangaram Pandey, who was a judge of the High Court of Suriname. After considerable efforts, he was able to trace family of his parents in a village in district Basti. He came to India with a lot of excitement to meet his long-lost relatives. He was shocked when on arrival, their relatives refused to accept him. Naturally, he was not only disappointed but heartbroken. On inquiring from the village elders, he came to know the relatives were worried and afraid that he had come to claim his share of the property, so they had refused to accept him. He explained to these relatives that he had not come to claim any share of the property, but had come to meet them and help them if he can. Second one, Rajiv Pandey, the President of Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, came to India with his family in 1997 as the chief guest on our Republic Day. A visit was arranged to his maternal parents' ancestral home in Faizabad district of UP. Ramesh Bhandari, the then governor of UP, along with thousands of people had come to welcome him, and the meeting with his relation was a very emotional one. You hardly saw any dry eye on the occasion. The things that hit me most was to observe that his relations were still living in mud houses in a village without a road, while he was the Prime Minister and most of the Indians in Trinidad were living in better homes and with better facilities. Again, to let you know that per capita income in 2019 in Trinidad was US dollars 17,398, US dollars 6,609 in Guyana, US dollars 6,359 in Suriname, while India was 209 only. Nearly after 75 years, the regular flow of Indians to the Caribbean came to an end in 1917. A total number of over 500,000 Indians were brought to the Caribbean as indentured labor. Presently, their number has gone up to about 2.5 million. The upward movement of the Indian continued after the system of indentureship had come to an end. Visited by religious and social leaders from India helped in sustaining and reviewing their faith. On 13th May 1945, the Indians celebrated 100 years of their arrival in Trinidad with a lot of fervor. Over 30,000 Indians assembled to celebrate the centenary of their domicile in Trinidad. The event was indicative of coming up of Indians in the Caribbean. On that occasion, Indians in Trinidad contributed $50,490 to the Indian family relief efforts. In the later half of the 20th century, the Indians in the Caribbean had made impressive progress in all fields. Even in politics, they emerged as strong players. Seti Jagan in Guyana became the president of the country. Rajiv Pandey, first Indian to be the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Kamala Prasad Basesar, the first Indian lady Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Jagannath Lakshman remained Speaker of the National Assembly of Suriname for a long time and was called Sabhapati. Ram Sevak Shankar was the first Indian to be the President of Suriname. Recently, Chandrakant Santokhi became the President of Suriname and he made a history by swearing on Rig Veda. Indians in the Caribbean do not send any remittance to India, but they do make us feel proud of their achievement. Their love and attachment for India is their major contribution. They have not only transplanted Indian culture in that far off places, but have nurtured, preserved, and flourished it. Indian music, dance, and other art forms are being regularly practiced. Indian cultural centers set up in the Indian diplomatic mission are making a big contribution to preservation and propagation of these art forms. Indians celebrate Indian festival of Diwali, Holi with a lot of gusto. In Trinidad, they have built Diwali Nagar, where month-long festivities and functions take place. In Suriname, Holi called Fagwa is a national holiday. The Indian cuisine, Indian dresses are very popular. In fact, the Indians in the Caribbean have rectified the mistake of Columbus of calling this new found world as Indies by creating a new India there. I thank you for your attention, and I will also like to thank Professor Gaur for organizing this discussion for me. Bye-bye. God bless.